Hello friends, so today's video is going to be a new which edition is best, specifically for Naomi Novik's Spinning Silver. And if you haven't seen me do this style video, I have done this for the Shades of Magic trilogy, I've done this for Red Rising, and the idea is that I try to get my hands on as many of the editions that exist of a given book or series, and then show you what they look like in person, as much as possible so that you can see what the size is like, you can see what the colors are like, you can have an idea of what the books look like. One, because I think it's really interesting to see how different the art styles are from one country to the next, and also the presentation itself. Some countries more so have the covers directly on a hardback as opposed to having the sleeve have the image and then nothing really on the hardback, those sorts of details, along with things like on the spines. Certain countries have the direction of the words going a different direction than what I'm used to. And so I like seeing all of these differences, but on top of that, if you are somebody who is a book collector, or if you're somebody who maybe English isn't the only language you speak and you're actually interested in getting a certain book in the other languages you speak, then you can see what those editions look like and you can figure out if you'd like to purchase them for yourself. You don't have to have read the book to watch and enjoy and look at all these beautiful editions, because truly, these are some of the most beautiful editions from one country to the next. They all are basically knocking it out of the park. And I don't know that I can pick a favorite, but I'm really excited to see which one ends up being your favorite. But I'm not going to spoil anything for the book. I do want to give you a brief idea of what the book is about in case you haven't read it. That way, when I'm discussing what about certain covers I think represent the books well, you kind of have an idea of why I have that opinion. I do quite like this book, so I wouldn't mind if more people picked it up. It's very popular. It's not like it's some underhyped book or something. But either way, the way it's going to be structured is that I will start by just holding up the books, showing you what I call an in-frame view. So when I'm in frame, so you can see an idea of the size of the book and the colors, things like that. And then I'm also going to include a flip through for each of the editions. That way, some of you have pointed out you would really like to see the size of the font and those sorts of things. So I'll do a mini flip through for every single one of the editions. I'll have what country or what language the edition is from on the screen, and then also I'll have as much information as possible in the description bar in case you are looking to get some of these for yourself. Starting with a general synopsis for this story, this is a historical fiction fantasy, and it very much feels like a grim fairy tale. It does have fae within the story. I think a lot of us have come to think of fae in a fantasy romance type of setting, but this actually has fae in the sense that they are very much tied to the atmosphere. They are truly terrifying, they're mysterious, they seem to play a role in the weather, and you don't want to really come in contact with them because you know that they are tricksters, you know that they tend to deceive because they have a different code of conduct than humans do. And the idea is that one of our main characters, in trying to provide for her family, she starts to take on her father's money lending business. He is not exceptional at his job because of a lot of factors. One, he's extremely nice, and when he lends money out to people, he does feel a little bit bad trying to then ask for that money back and then with interest. So he isn't the best at doing that, but on top of that, there is this element of the fact the family is Jewish, and they are dealing with a lot of people who have negative stereotypes about them, and he is fearful for his family that if he does call upon what is owed, then people will start to touch on those negative stereotypes to defend themselves. And at some point, our main character has decided she's had enough. Her family is reaching a point of poverty, so she's going to do everything she can to earn what is rightfully theirs and provide for them. In doing this, she turns silver into gold with the idea of gaining interest, and that catches the attention of the Fae because they see this as magical. And so now she's found herself not only having to deal with the everyday dealings of life, but then also now having to interact with the Fae and deal with them as well. Beyond just having this character's perspective, her name is Miriam, you also get a handful of other perspectives. Some of the story touches on things like abuse within families. We also see a character who is tied to nobility and how they are trying to navigate that and forge a path for themselves. This book, I always say, is one of those stories that it shows the quiet ways in which our characters can be powerful, even if they themselves don't seem to have a lot of power over others. How they find power for their own life is really empowering in a not quite eloquent way to put it, but regardless, I absolutely love the story. It is a standalone. It's the perfect winter read because the atmosphere is incredibly cold and it plays a big role in the character's life. But regardless, now that you have an idea of what the story is about, I wanted to jump into the edition. The first two that I'm going to show in frame, I'm going to show what is probably my absolute least favorite of these editions, and then I'm going to show one of my favorites. So, one of my least favorites. It's not a surprise if you know my taste in books. I really do not like when there is a real person on the cover or a very real looking person on the cover. And this one, for me, it looks a little cheesy. I will say, though, I like the color combinations on this because it feels Christmassy. It feels wintry. It feels like her dress looks like a tree in a sense, and the gold on there with the silver, I like that there is that detail of that color combination. I also do like how chunky this particular edition is. You wouldn't even think it's the same book because it's so much thicker than a lot of the other editions. So I do like that about it. Without its sleeve, it's quite simple. It's just gray, but I do like on the inside that there's this pretty gold color. So if this was perhaps a little more stylized, if there was something a little bit more artistic, I guess you could say, about the cover, I think I would actually quite like it. But with there being a rather real looking person, or I think actually a real person on this cover, it's not my favorite. Now we look at this next edition, which I love. I love this color combination. I love how frigid and icy it looks. It absolutely fits the setting. It does not, in my opinion, really quite capture the fae elements, of course. It doesn't really capture the personal struggles of the characters, but I do think it's a beautiful cover. I like the details of this tree here because it brings in that additional layer of nature into the cover beyond just having this sort of frozen looking setting. And I do like this here as well because I think it kind of ties to this somewhat rural feel to the story. This particular edition I have has fancier edges. I will admit I thought these were going to be a little bit shinier. It kind of just looks like normal pages that are a little more gray than the typical white tint or off-white tint. I do really like, though, when you open it up, you have this detail, and then the naked hardback has that as well. I like that a lot. I always love when you take the sleeve off and there's a fun little surprise on the inside. So I do like that, but it's not my favorites out of all of these. It's one of my favorites. It's not my absolute favorite, though. The next two, the covers themselves are not all that similar, but they do have a feature to them that I have come to find is, I guess, pretty common in other countries, but I've never encountered it in the US really. So the little detail would be, I'm not sure what to call this. It's like a paper sleeve over the cover. So it's just this little half sleeve, quarter sleeve, third, it's probably more of a third, that you can move. And this and the next edition I'll show both had that. I sadly have misplaced the one that went on this cover, but these both had that around them. And so I'm now very curious, for those of you who are outside of the US, is that something that's really common where you live, or are you like me where you don't see it all that often? I am going to take that little piece off though for the sake of showing you the entirety of the artwork on the cover. I really like the way that all of it seems to be taken up with the artwork itself. There is text here, you do see it, but it's put into the image so well, so seamlessly, that it doesn't really look like there's even text on the cover. So it gives the appearance of almost being printed on a naked hardback. What's interesting is I would call this a paperback sleeve, because this is not a hardback edition, but I wouldn't quite call it a paperback edition. It has a sleeve, but then it's a paperback. And it has that sort of almost cardboard look to it. So it's a little different. It's interesting. It's not something I'm used to. Now, the cover itself, I think that this is a really pretty image. This isn't my favorite of the covers. I think if I saw this photograph on a travel account or something on Instagram, I'd be like, wow, what a beautiful photo. But as a cover, I think that it's a little simple in its design and its approach. Is it pretty? Yeah, I think it's pretty. Does it capture that wintry feel? Yes, it absolutely does. And it also, I pointed this out before, it has that sort of rural feel to it as well. But it's just a little simple for my taste, but it is striking. Even looking at it in the camera, there's just something about how they did it that I think really captures the eye. Like I said before, this edition also came with that third sleeve, and this one, it's not my favorite. I do like the way that it sort of seems to be an interesting play on a snowflake, and it kind of ends up having an eerie look to it, and it also almost looks like branches, like it's taking the look of a snowflake and then making it a little more sinister almost, and so I like that concept. And I like the font style. It's very different from what we see with a lot of the other editions, but it's not my favorite. It is cool, but it's not anything that I find if I had to pick, absolutely it would not be in my top. It does, though. It is kind of cool to see it. First off, this orange is quite a choice to have on the inside here, but I do really like it on the naked hardback. That I love. I love that detail. And I almost think maybe I would like it more if it was just like this. You know, it didn't have the sleeve necessarily, but you can always take the sleeve off, right? So the inside also has that design. This might be my favorite way that they've tied it in, is just to have it partially on that inside. So they have it on the back as well. Next up, we have the one that is the reason for the delay in me having to wait until this year to do this video instead of last year. I had ordered this one. I was so excited. I was ready to go. And then I kept getting an email saying, oh, we actually don't have it. We'll keep you updated though. And then a couple months later, I'd get the same email. And then eventually I realized I'm never getting it. So I better just look for it elsewhere or decide to do this video without it. Luckily, I did find it. It's not even the best edition. That's what's funny is it's like kind of, I like it. It's not my favorite, but anywho, this is the edition. I really like the color choice. I like the gray and blue with yellow. I think that that is not something that I would have picked. I do like that it has the building not as emphasized because so many of the editions really emphasize the buildings here, and so I like that this one it's a little more subdued, but then the image of the bird is a lot more prominent there at the top. This is what it looks like on the back, so I like that they kept the design, but they toned it down for the back so that you could focus on what the text is saying. When you open it, so this is not one where the sleeve comes off. It just has a flap even though it's a paperback, but when you open it, it's so yellow. It's so bright. So, I mean, it's bold. I like the boldness there. And I do think that this edition is cool, but that's, I think I just kind of middle of the road feelings for this edition. I like it. I'm glad I have it. It's not my favorite. This next one, I think I have an interesting bias towards it in that it absolutely represents spinning silver, but this is the Japanese edition, and I feel like the art style still feels Japanese while capturing the spinning silver feel. And I think that that's really cool. I don't quite know how they managed to do that, but you clearly can tell, oh, that's spinning silver. So this is the cover. I like it. It is a kind of simple art style. It's not the most extravagant, but I think it's really quite pretty. I like that it's a hardback. I like the size of the hardback. It feels nice to hold. What I will say is I don't like that there is essentially nothing exceptional on the back. You just have the barcodes, which is disappointing because they had an opportunity to do something really beautiful on the back, maybe continued the design because you see the chain and it's going from silver into gold, which I really like. I like that detail. You could have done something with that because it's barely, get a few snowflakes. I just wish there was something, but it has the wintry feel. I just think this one is great. I love the color combination. I like the design with this having sort of a, you would think it's a border, but then she's somewhat out of it and then it sort of shows the path ahead. It makes it feel like the story is focused in on her, but then she has to, I talked about the characters forging their own paths and having that path in front of them. I don't know if the cover designer even thought about these things, but it does represent, I think, the story very well. So maybe some of you also think that it's really cool, or maybe some of you are like, I thought some of the other ones were better. I don't know what it is. I just like that blend of different styles and the representation of the story itself. I really like this one. The next two are similar in size. They're both paperbacks. They both have a similar weight to them. and they look quite different. I really love the look of this cover. Is it anything special? No, it's not exceptional. It's kind of just fine. It looks like a lot of other covers we've seen, but it's very pretty. I like the dark blue with the teal and then that little pop of red. I think it has that wintry feeling. It almost seems though like, and maybe this is just me, it seems to be capturing the fairy tale feel. I don't know if it's the flower that makes me think of different fairy tales where somebody, Sleeping Beauty or something, where they prick their finger or whatever. I don't know. It just has that fairy tale feeling while still having that coldness to it as well. This one to me is very interesting. I think that with the design of these kind of both these buildings having a different color suits the different characters and their status. It's almost like there's these opposing forces. I don't want to give away, there is another detail to the magic and the magical people that I don't want to give away, but I also feel like that is captured in these different colors and cold and hot, but it's still not my favorite. I do like it though. They're both quite cool covers. Next up is the traditional American hardback. This one I quite like. I actually really like this. I think it captures the fairy tale feel. We have the look here of the fae. We have the look of our main character. The expression on her face, the way she is shown, I think fits her very well. It fits the description of her, both in her physical appearance and her personality. And just that intensity of her, that resilience, I think is captured in her expression really, really well. Obviously, you get the coins here, which I love. And it just looks, it has that old-timey look. It feels like you're about to flip the pages of this old fairy tale. I really like this cover. There's nothing really exceptional on the back, sadly, because that would have been fun. And there's not really anything fun about the naked hardback. It's just blue, which is fine. It looks nice, but some of the other ones had something fun underneath, which I like. I definitely saved what I think are some of the best for last. I had a few in there mixed in that I like. These three I think are probably the top. This first one is my husband's favorite. So this would be a special edition, and the presentation is fantastic. Because it's a special edition, it does have some additional bells and whistles to it that are worth noting. One, look at the shine. So this is what I had thought that the UK hardback would have with the special edition that I own. I thought it would be this really intense shine to it. That's what I was hoping for. Then it also has a ribbon, which always makes everything feel a little extra fancy. It is signed by the author. It is also numbered, which is exciting. And there's actually some illustrations throughout. So here's one of the illustrations when you first open it up. The book on its own could have been a little fancier. You just have the coins on the naked hardback, which I like, but I think they could have done something a little more with it, especially because this is a little bit higher in the price tag. But I like this decision to go with this purple hue. And I think that it still looks wintry, it still looks cold, but it's kind of stepping away from all the blue that we keep seeing, because the blue is the obvious choice. So going with this very, very cool toned purple, I think was a bold decision, but it worked. I love the look of it. I don't know. I wish that the character looked in a slightly, because I was saying with the US one, she has this intense look to her, which I think is fitting of her personality, whereas this one, they kind of made her look like she looks a little confused to me. So the art is fantastic. I just wish that there had been an emphasis on that part of her in how she was portrayed. But I still quite like the way that they captured turning silver into gold. The back also has that fairy tale, interesting, darker thing tied in. We also get the really cold look and the cold setting with the forest and the small little house. I think that the details in this one are fantastic. And in the flip through, you'll get to see a little bit more of the illustrations that come inside this one. That one, of course, has the advantage of being a special edition. As far as non-special editions go, I think these next two are my personal favorites. This first one, I think, is amazing. I love the black and white. I just think that this one, I actually think it's capturing some little details like this crown that gets touched on in the story, the eeriness of the woods, and even though the other one that I pointed out that had the differences in the buildings kind of representing the differences in the magical forces, I think by having the black and white, it captures that as well, but not as obviously. It's a little more subtle. And any book gets bonus points as soon as this is the case. Okay, so this is the sleeve. And this is without the sleeve. It's printed right on the hardback. We all love that. Does anybody not like that? I feel like we all love it. We all love when the images are printed on the naked hardback. It looks so good too, especially with there being the black and white. You don't lose out, because sometimes if you try to print directly on the hardback, I think you lose some of the details, or the colors are a little more muted. But this looks so good. It looks so good. I absolutely love it. There's nothing fancy about the interior. It's just, look at, you opened the book. But this itself, I think, looks so good, which is why if you looked at it at first and you're like, it's fine, this ups it a lot for me to have that on the naked hardback. And then last, this one I love. I love this one. It is printed right on the naked hardback. There is no sleeve. I love the look of the blue, but there is sort of this mistiness in the blue itself. And then I like the way that there is this animal on the cover that I think sort of represents the Fae very well. And the animal has this kind of crown. And anyway, I'll just show you. I think that this is so cool. I love the way that it captures the light. It looks slightly different depending on how you hold it up. You can see what I mean by it has the misty look within the blue, which I think captures the cold. I like the color choice. This particular hue of blue I think is really pretty. It has this depth to it, this deepness that I really like. It's not cheery. It doesn't make me think, oh, this is going to be a happy read. It has that sort of darkness to it, that mystery to it. And I like the font choice. I think it's really cool. And then on the back, you get this sort of strange look to the Fae, which I really like because it also sort of captures the mystery and the intensity of the Fae. The pages themselves are, you might not be able to tell, but they're an interesting color. They're almost blue themselves because they're so white. When you open it, it has this very frosty, snowy look. And then even the way the font looks here and the height of the book. Man, this might be my favorite. I really like this one. I'm very curious to know for all of you, out of all of these, which one has been your favorite? Which one did you completely disagree with me on? Which one did you see and you're like, how does she not like that one? I love that one. Or which one is one that you're like, why does she like that? It's kind of boring. So I'd love to know your thoughts on these. That's it though for essentially almost every single one of the editions of Spinning Silver. I loved getting every time one of these books came in, it was always really exciting to see. It was always really interesting to look at the different art styles. So I would love to know which one really caught your eye, which one really surprised you. And also, if you'd like to see this kind of style video in the future, what's another book that you would like me to do this for? I do plan to do this for Strange the Dreamer. I've been meaning to do it for Strange the Dreamer for quite a while, so that'll be one that I eventually get around to, but I'd love to hear your suggestions. But anyway, thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you later. Bye.